following program is to provide entertainment and information. It is not considered to be any legal or investment advice.
Good morning, appraisers. Let's talk some real estate. You're listening to the Voice of Appraisal, the #1 appraisal podcast in America that always brings you the latest news and information from the front lines of the real estate market. Anything from market conditions, appraisal regulations, cryptocurrencies, big bank news. So if you have a question, we have all of your answers. We are your one-stop source for all of your real estate appraisal information needs. If you want to be in the know, you have definitely tuned in to the right show. I'm your host, Will Crawford. Happy to have all of you here with us today as we wind down this year, this crazy-ass year that has been 2020. And I'm sure all of you out there are exhausted. I'm sure that you've been slammed since March 5th of 2020 when the 10-year Treasury yield went below 1% for the first time. I'm sure all of you are just like, okay, I've had enough. But guess what? I firmly believe I'm going to make this call. I'm going to make this call to you today. I think 2021, I think you're going to be just as busy in 2021 as you have been all throughout 2020. I do not see interest rates going up. If they do go up, it will wreck a great majority of the economy. I do believe that the only way that we're going to get out of this coronavirus mess is to keep interest rates low. I'm starting to see mortgage interest rates decline as I see the 10-year Treasury yield increase. That tells me that there may be a decoupling there. And if that is the case, and I've heard from other podcasts with major experts that we could be looking at 30-year mortgages around 2% and 15-year mortgages around 1% into 2021. And that will continue to drive the refinance boom that has been going on and has started since March of 2020. It has been an incredible year, and it's just been one of those years where you're just kind of like, wow. I think these policies, these fiscal policies, will be in place no matter who the president is. Right now, the presidential election is a mess. I'm going to give you my probability on it. I told Jonathan Miller last time I did the podcast, what my probability was. So January 20th, 2021, this is Phil Crawford's probability as to who gets into the presidency. I got 50% on Joe Biden. I've got 30% on Donald Trump. I got 10% on an all-out civil war. And I got 10% on the second coming of Jesus Christ. All right? 50% on Joe, 30% on the Don, 10% on civil war, and 10% on Jesus. JC 2.0. JC 2.0, I'll bump that up to 10% given everything that's going on in the world today. But I've got some good news today. I've got some really good news. I'm very excited about this because something that we've been working on for a long time has now come to fruition. And I'm just totally pumped up about it. About a year and a half ago, maybe now when I think about it, probably 2 years ago, we did a Voice of Appraisal podcast. It's episode number 218. And the title of it is A Gift from the ABA, a gift from the ABA, a gift from the American Bankers Association. And on this podcast, I broke down in detail the fact that the American Bankers Association made a statement at the time that the appraisal that was done for the bank in a lending transaction, especially in transactions where there's a buyer and a seller in a purchase transaction, that appraisal should not be used by any parties other than the bank. They should not be used by the buyer. There's no benefit to the buyer whatsoever when it comes to the decision of purchasing that home. I covered that in that episode 218. I also covered a California court precedent as well that stated basically the same thing. And we also had Peter Christensen on talking about certification number 23 and a clarification of certification number 23 in your appraisal reports. So all this was going on back about 2 years ago on the Voice of Appraisal podcast. And honestly, it was one of the big reasons why we really focused in on the FindMyAppraiser.com professional network and think tank, because we wanted to have an avenue for consumers to go to say, look, when you buy a home, the appraisal that's being done for the bank is not for your benefit. You should get your own appraisal, okay? So we did episode 218. Shortly after episode 218, Sharon Whitaker, who's with the American Bankers Association, joined me on the show for episode 220. And we discussed the issues that we were talking about. The issue is that the lending institutions have their own products, their appraisal products, their valuation products that they use to cover their own risk assessment, but these products should not be used by consumers when making a decision to buy a home. And we discussed that in detail with Sharon. So what Lori Noble and I decided to do with the FindMyAppraiser.com professional network, which was up and running at that time and ready to go, and we were doing a great job. Matter of fact, well, actually at that time, it had a different name, but the hardware store guys got after us, so we had to change the name to Find My Appraiser, which actually which actually works out nicely anyways. I like the name Find My Appraiser better anyways. Remember, it's Find My Appraiser, not to be confused with Find an Appraiser, which other organizations are working on now. Just, again, playing catch-up to Phil Crawford, Lori Noble, and the good people over at Find My Appraiser. But anyways, that being said, we created the FMA network to develop a new product that would be a benefit to consumers when they are purchasing a home, to get the appraisal done, to get their own appraisal prior to purchasing a home, because the appraisal that's done for the bank should not be used for their benefit. So Lori and I decided to work on a series of disclosures. Well, what ended up happening is some people over at the National Association of Realtors, remember they have the N.A.R. has a Real Property Valuation Committee. The Real Property Valuation Committee picked up what we were doing. We were laying the groundwork for it. We were putting out a good blueprint, and they picked it up, and they decided to put together a special committee called the Valuation Disclosure Form Work Group. That was a new work group that came out, and they worked on this concept of coming out with a valuation disclosure form for consumers on a level of consumer protection that would explain to them how the valuation process worked with banks and what they should do when it comes to getting the proper information before they buy a home. Well, that work group, and I think that work group started at the beginning of 2020. And that work group just released their recent brochure. It's called Your Home is an Investment, Know Its Value. A lot of people behind the scenes on this were considering this to be the know before you owe disclosure. We talked about this a lot during the FindMyAppraiser.com, our think tank meetings. This is the know before you owe disclosure. So what I'm really excited about here, this new disclosure form that came out from this work group really does help us out, especially with FMA, to define and create the new product that I've been working on for a long time. There's two products that I've been working on when it comes to Voice of Appraisal to move appraisers in a different direction other than traditional banking work. Because I firmly believe that traditional banking work is going to level off, is going to slow down probably after 2021 when the AI, that's an artificial intelligence, algorithms start to hit the second page of the URAR. The second page of the URAR right now, there is AI, artificial intelligence algorithms that are trying to do what you do, what takes you 45 minutes to do in a series of seconds, okay? So I'm looking at our profession and I'm looking at my workflow and saying we need to develop a new product line. Well, something like this, something that came out of this work group really helps us to develop this new product line. The second, this is the first product line, which is a consumer advocacy pre-purchase appraisal product, very similar to the home inspection model. So this has been on my radar for a long time, been one of my big goals to push out there. The second goal that I've got is to work with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to get the tokenization products available going into 2022, 23, and 24. So property tokenization, that's going to be a really dirty space unless appraisers are involved in it. And that's where we need to work with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and also work with them to try to find out ways of doing these tokens, these property tokens, without having to adhere to all of the private placement accredited investor rules and regulations that we have in the United States. So those have been my two big product pushes really since Appraiser Fest, because I want to drive work into different directions if the traditional banking model is not going to be working for us. If you guys are out there right now doing the traditional banking 1004, that product most likely is going away and you need to move your cheese into different directions. But to do that, you need disclosures like this one here. So let me go ahead and read the disclosure for you, because the National Association of Realtors rocks it in this disclosure, and it helps out appraisers on levels you'd never even imagine. It helps out bankers, and it helps out appraisers. Realtors? I'm not so sure. Let me go ahead and read it really quick, and I'll explain what I'm talking about here. The brochure goes on like this. Your home is an investment. Know its value. Be an informed home buyer. The appraiser is an independent, impartial, and objective professional in the mortgage transaction. An appraiser develops an appraisal which is a credible, reliable, and supported opinion of value. The appraisal is typically used by the lender in a home purchase transaction. This assists the lender's decisions to provide funds for a mortgage. While the lender is technically the owner of the appraisal, as a borrower, you still have certain rights. You have rights, okay? You have the right to obtain your own appraisal even if you are paying cash for the property. You have a right to know what type of valuation service is being ordered on your loan. And you have a right to make an appraisal a contingency in your sales agreement. A home purchase is typically this is where I'm not going to call it plagiarism. I'm not going to say that. I'm just saying there's a little bit of copying from the FMA network. It's okay. If you guys, look, if you want to be John Lennon, I will be your Yoko Ono. FMA will be your Yoko Ono. It's totally fine. A home purchase is typically the largest investment someone will make. Protect yourself by getting your investment appraised. The appraiser will observe the property, analyze the data, and report their findings to the client. The client may be the lender, the borrower, or another third party. An appraisal ordered by the lender, now this is very important, listen, an appraisal ordered by a lender is for the benefit of the lender to ensure that the collateral that they are using to securitize the loan is sufficient. An appraisal is not a home inspection. While all appraisals are valuation services, not all valuation services are appraisals. I think that line talks a little bit above a consumer, but that's okay. There are a number of products which appraisers, real estate brokers, and other entities prepare, which varies in levels of analysis, detail, and reliability. For the most comprehensive and least comprehensive, they are, and of course, there's a list of all the different valuation products. So let's get into this really quick here, because this is the exciting part. First of all, we have the largest trade group, the largest real estate trade group in America, coming out now and saying, bottom line, what we've been saying on Voice of Appraisal 218 and 220, that the appraisal that is done by the lender is to the benefit of the lender and not to you. You have a right to obtain your own appraisal, and you also have the right to make the appraisal a contingency in the contract. Now, it's that contingency that I want to talk about first, okay? They don't address this. I wish they did address it, but I think this is something that the legal department over at the National Association of Realtors, working with the Valuation Committee, may have to tackle into 2021. Most of the time, when you look at these contracts, remember, this is very important, the real estate contract, how it is written, how it is put together will be under the microscope in 2021. That's a guarantee. That's a given. The N.A.R. probably knows that. They are highly connected throughout Washington, D.C., as we are. And I'll tell you right now, the sales contract will be under the microscope. So the big question is this. Most of your sales contracts out there, when you review them, you look at them and they say that property must appraise at or above the sales price. That's part of the appraisal contingency in a lot of the contracts that you review. What they don't talk about in the contract is which appraisal will be used to satisfy the appraisal contingency in the sales contract. Which one? Not it has to appraise at or above, but which one will be the key factor to determine if it appraises at or above the sales price, okay? So that's going to be a big deal. I would love to see these sales contracts from this point on have the appraisal contingency in them that says it has to appraise at or above, and the buyer accepts the quote-unquote little box, the lender's appraisal to satisfy this contingency, their own appraisal to satisfy their contingency. You see, there has to be, in my personal opinion, some disclosure as to which appraisal will that buyer rely upon to satisfy that contingency. Most of the time right now, the real estate agents will just say, hey, we'll get the appraisal back from the bank, and whatever that bank appraisal is, well, that's it. It appraised at or above, so we're good to go. But if the agent doesn't disclose to the consumer at that time that this appraisal is not to your benefit, and that if you want to get your own, you should get your own. See, a lot of agents out there do not disclose that, especially the agents that have been in business for a long time. They'll say, okay, it has to appraise at or above, and when the appraisal comes in from the bank, then they say, hey, there you go. The appraisal contingency is satisfied. But they don't disclose the fact that that appraisal is not to be used to their benefit. It's very similar. I know real estate agents that have been sued by attorneys that I work with because they tell their buyers, hey, look, you don't need to get an owner's title policy. You don't need to get that. You don't need to get an owner's title policy. Yeah, you don't need to have that. Or they don't disclose that you should get an owner's title policy to cover you, because title policies, they cover the bank, but they don't cover the owner of the property unless you buy a separate policy, right? So if the agent doesn't disclose that you should get a separate owner's policy, or they say you don't need one, well, guess what? They could be sued and have been sued and have paid out big money because something goes wrong with the title. The same thing holds true with this appraisal contingency. If the agent is not out there fully disclosing that we're going to have an appraisal contingency in this contract, but just remember, the appraisal that's being done is being done by the bank, and if you want to get your own appraisal, you really should have your own appraisal performed and then go from that point on. That should be the appraisal that you should use to make your decision, because that appraisal will be done for your benefit while the other appraisal is done for the benefit of the lender. There's a big disclosure issue here. So by working by this valuation disclosure form work group, they've properly disclosed this, and I'm happy as can be about it as a real estate appraiser. Remember, my job on this show since 2014 is to advocate for you, to be an advocate for the profession, to make sure your fax machine and your email continues to go off and the orders continue to come in. And if I see down the road that the orders may start to filter off from the bank, we need to create a new product line. And we did. And now, because of this disclosure form, it even helps out that product line even more. This disclosure form has really helped out two parties in particular. Number one, it's helped out the banks. See, the banks were always worried and always concerned that the consumers would not understand their process of risk assessment. This disclosure puts those worries and concerns to bed. Its bottom line, this appraisal should be used by the bank and for the benefit of the bank. This is also a great disclosure for real estate appraisers, because a lot of times people think that the appraisal that we do for the bank is for someone else's benefit other than the banks. As a matter of fact, what I think we should do, especially at Aero, if there's another Aero conference or a virtual conference or something, is I think the regulators of all of the 55 jurisdictions, because of this disclosure form, I think a brand new set of protocols should be made, because right now you've got the largest trade group, the largest real estate trade organization in America today saying that a lender's appraisal is not to the benefit of anybody else but the lender. So when you have non-intended users out there reporting appraisers to state boards, I firmly believe now that this disclosure is out there in the marketplace, now it's out there, everybody knows it, and it's coming from the National Association of Realtors, I firmly believe that a new set of protocols, a separate set of protocols should be in place in all 55 jurisdictions that will basically say that if you are a non-intended user, you need to follow these protocols to file a complaint. And one of those protocols, I firmly believe, should be your own appraisal arguing against the appraiser that you're complaining on. You have to bring evidence. You have to bring proof of what is going on. You can't just say, hey, look, they didn't do it right. They didn't do it right. You're a non-intended user. Now, if you're an intended user, if you're a client, and you want to report someone to the state, that's a totally different scenario. But I firmly believe now that this is out, now that this disclosure is out there in the world, I firmly believe that the 55 jurisdictions should set up separate protocols for non-intended users, because it's out there, because the public knows it. This is all part of the public trust, and this is now going out to the public. They understand it. They know it. This is the way it works. So I think it is a valuable disclosure for bankers. It is a valuable disclosure for real estate appraisers, and it is a liability exposure to real estate agents and realtors. That's what this disclosure has done. Disclosed for banks, disclosed for appraisers, exposed liability for real estate agents. I think in 2021, real estate agents should have new continuing education guidelines, probably a 2-hour course specifically addressing appraisal contingencies in contracts, how to write them, how to negotiate them, and how to properly disclose to buyers how the valuation process works and what should be done. I think every single time that a property goes under contract, the agent must be saying to these buyers, especially the buyer's agent, who they have a fiduciary responsibility to say, look, the appraisal that will be done for the benefit of the lender if you're getting a mortgage. Go get your own appraisal if you want to. If not, then you should waive your appraisal contingency. If the appraisal is done and there hasn't been a proper disclosure as to which appraisal will waive the contingency, there could be the argument made that the contract was not fully executed. These are all arguments that could be made in court at a later time when real estate agents in 2022 and 2023 and 2024 are paying out millions upon millions upon millions of dollars in claims from their E&O insurance policies because a buyer says to them years later, you didn't properly disclose what I needed to do in this transaction. I think a 2-hour course on contracts and on appraisal contingencies is needed throughout the National Association of Realtors and to realtors unto themselves, especially the quote-unquote veteran realtors, the realtors that have been in this business for a very long time. This is a new world to them. The veteran realtors will need to have the proper education when it comes to the disclosure of how the appraisal process works. That appraisal that is done for the bank is not to the benefit of the buyer. The other thing that this work group puts together, which I think is pretty cool, is the fact that they break down all of these different kind of valuations that are done. And this is why the banking institutions and the ABA wanted to get ahead of this, and I understand it. And Sharon Whitaker did a terrific job supporting the ABA and the members of the American Bankers Association. She did a terrific job. But this work group breaks down these 6 different products through the appraisal report. They talk about an appraisal report, traditional appraisal report, a hybrid or bifurcated appraisal report, a desktop appraisal, a CMA or a BPO, an E-valuation, or an AVM, also known as a Sex Panther AVM on the Voice of Appraisal podcast. So you have 6 different items, 6 different valuation tools that a lender could use. And it's important as a buyer to find out what kind of valuation tool the lender is using. That being said, however, what if you have an appraisal contingency? Remember, you have an appraisal contingency, an appraisal. You don't have a CMA contingency. You don't have an evaluation contingency. And you certainly don't have a Sex Panther AVM contingency. No, you have an appraisal contingency. So of the 6 valuation services that this disclosure puts out there, only 3 of them are appraisals. So you have to ask yourself, if the lender does a Sex Panther AVM, or if it does a PIW, a piston in the wind appraisal waiver, or if there's an evaluation done or a CMA, was the appraisal performed? Was any appraisal performed? And if so, was that appraisal contingency satisfied? Was the contract fully executed? And did the buyer obtain their own appraisal? And was all of this disclosed to the buyer at the time of the transaction? Remember, you get in trouble when you go to court when you don't properly disclose to homeowners what's going on in these sales transactions. So at the end of the day, I'm excited. I'm excited because the FindMyAppraiser.com professional network was designed for this very specific product, to be out there for consumers before they purchase a home, because most consumers consider the home to be the largest investment in their life. As a matter of fact, I think our commercial says, don't let your largest investment be your greatest liability. That's how our commercial reads. That's been the focus of going forward with this new product line. Pat Turner and I were talking about this several years ago. You know, if we take our product, if we take our services and we move it over to the home inspection model, which is basically what we're doing here, you can really start to get a good market share, and people will start to come to you before each transaction, just like they would when getting a home inspection. 20 years ago, home inspection, did you get one? Sometimes you waived it, sometimes you didn't. Now, every single agent out there is saying, go get your own home inspection. The same thing is going to take place now when it comes to the appraisal itself. Full disclosure for the bank, full disclosure for the appraisal, and because of the extra exposure on the realtor, more and more work will be driven your way. I love it. Absolutely love it. We've been working on this for a long time. I want to thank the National Association of Realtors. I want to thank the Real Property Valuation Committee for their hard work, dedication, fear of God, and love of country when it comes to this disclosure. Absolutely love it. I want to thank the Valuation Disclosure Form Work Group for putting this stuff out. It goes along perfectly with what the FMA platform has been saying for the last 2 years, and I think it's time to move forward with new products and information as well. The most important thing now going forward into 2021 is to get the education, to get the realtors educated on what all of this is about. We've got this disclosure now from the N.A.R. We've got court precedent in the state of California basically saying the same thing. This is moving full steam ahead. Folks, if you're worried as real estate appraisers that your banking work is going to get dried up, well, you might want to start talking to all of your real estate agents in your area saying, look, you know what? Before your buyer goes into it, why don't you hire me as the appraiser, and I will do a separate individual appraisal to not only satisfy your contingency, to not only satisfy the contingency in the contract, but to also make sure that everybody's knowledgeable. To make sure everybody's knowledgeable in the transaction. Make sure everything is fully disclosed. So we do have some extra exposure on the realtors because of this. So they're going to have to be educated on it. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk with Lori Noble. Remember, we have A Noble Education coming out in 2021. We're going to be covering macroeconomic theory. We're going to be covering fair housing through A Noble Education. And I think maybe a nice 1 hour, 2 hour CE course on contracts and on appraisal contingencies and in contracts. I think is going to be a terrific course for realtors and appraisers through anobleeducation.com. So you can get signed up at anobleeducation.com. Go to anobleeducation.com. It is the only CE that you're going to need going forward in your appraisal career. It's as simple and easy as that. It is continuing education. It is current education. It is living education. It is real estate education cocaine. Okay? That's what it is. Real estate education cocaine. It will make your heart rate go up. You'll be excited for days, and you just won't get enough. You'll need more and more and more of it. Go to anobleeducation.com. Get signed up for the new classes that are coming out. Our Macro 2021 class will be out very soon. And trust me, it will not be boring. Oh, my gosh. There's no way. I'll be teaching a great majority of the classes, and there's just no way that I will be a boring instructor. I promise all of you that, okay? Real estate, continuing education, cocaine. Go to anobleeducation.com. If you want to be part of the FindMyAppraiser.com professional network, go to www.findmyappraiser.com. Join us, man. Join us. We are having a good time with this. This is going to be great moving forward. We are the number one think tank. Trust me, we are it. We are the number one think tank in the appraisal profession. It doesn't get any better than us. I'm telling you that right now. We're ahead of the game. We play three-dimensional chess when it comes to getting more work in your pocket as a real estate appraiser. So my hat's off to the National Association of Realtors. Very excited about it. We laid the groundwork a couple years ago. They picked up the ball. They ran with it. They put it out there. Boom! Boom! Excited about all of it. This is terrific news. It's been a great year when it comes to making money. The years overall, it's been a show, but that's okay. And we're going to get deeper and deeper into things as time goes on. On my next show, I'm going to do my book report on the book Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Properties in America's Black Cities. This is by Dr. Andre Perry. And I'm going to do a book report on it. I've read this entire book cover to cover. It's a good book. I enjoyed reading it. I learned a lot from it. And I'm going to bring up some concepts that I learned from the book, and I'm going to put them into appraiser terms so that people can understand what Dr. Perry's position is. I would call this a personal position paper. That's what I would call this book. So I'll be discussing that on the next show. But well done, National Association of Realtors. Keep up the good work. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our show for this week. And as always, I'd like to thank you for listening as we journey through the mysteries and complexities that are, in fact, the real estate appraisal business. I would like to thank the Evaluation Disclosure Form Work Group at the National Association of Realtors for all of their hard work. God willing, we're going to be back here very soon, continuing to report from the front lines of the real estate market. In the meantime, you kiss your spouse, you hug your children, enjoy your day, be safe. Stay safe in the field. You've been listening to Phil Crawford on Voice of Appraisal, the #1 appraisal podcast in America. We'll talk very soon.